Jessica Hawk, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate having you on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, I guess first off, going into retirement in 1 week, before I kind of even go into asking about like your teaching career and all that stuff, how are you feeling?
It's a great question, and everybody asks me, "Are you so excited?" And it's bittersweet.
Yeah.
It's it's really a combination of feelings because I'm not leaving disgruntled. I'm not
Hmm.
leaving the profession because of some wrong that has been committed to me or my district. I'm just finished after 32 years and leaving a place that I absolutely love and have loved for the past 29 years is a difficult thing to do. I can't imagine going back for year 33. The idea makes me want to projectile vomit, but yet I am really kind of sad about
Mhm.
leaving my colleagues and my students because I've had such a great experience.
And so 29 years at the same school? Is that
Yes.
wow? Okay, so one of the questions I was going to ask you was like everyone kind of has a different idea of like you kind of teach at a few schools throughout your career. I guess like a lot of teachers do, I guess not for yourself, but why that one school? What kind of kept you there and like what did you love so much about it?
Great question. So I started off in Prince George's County, Maryland. I went to University of Maryland. I
Mhm.
went to a job fair at the end of my
Mhm.
senior year, and I should have known when I got hired on the spot that something was wrong. And here I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm such a good candidate. They like offered me a job. They almost wanted me to sign the contract immediately. And I'm thinking I'm this stellar graduate and they just
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
scoop me up because, of
I didn't
course,
even
they
tell you my
did.
GPA yet.
Wear my little green suit. It's 1992. I just have it all going on. Then I go to the school and I realize that we were the first school over the border from Washington, D.C. And so
Mhm.
all of the kids who got expelled from D.C. schools came to our school. So my first year of teaching was eighth grade, and I had third year eighth graders who were 15 going on 16. And when they turned 16, they could drop out. So here I was, Polly Prissy Pants, going in thinking I was going to change the world. Meanwhile, I have kids who have been through so much in their lives.
Yeah.
And honestly, they hated me in the beginning because here's another person coming in to save them. And it really was a wake up call for me. And it was great, a great learning experience. By the end of the year, they liked me enough to walk me through the halls so that I didn't get jumped. So that was very nice. But I just knew that I would not last in teaching if I was in that situation.
Mhm.
So I left that school and then I was a substitute teacher for 2 years in another district,
Mhm.
which is near the one where I'm working now. And I taught summer school with 50 kids per class, 2 hour long sessions, absolute nightmare. So when I got to the school that I work in now, everything else was going to be easier than what I had done. So they were already at an advantage
Mhm. Yeah,
because
it's like just give me less than 50 and you're good.
exactly, make sure
And
somebody
don't
doesn't want to shank me, I'm good. So when I go in and they said,
the
"Oh,
little things.
you're young and, this might be difficult for you." And I'm like, "Pumpkin, that's adorable." I'm teaching in farm country, South Jersey. You think this is going to be
Mhm.
difficult? And we did have
Mhm.
some issues, but basically what kept me there so long was the administration because it was in an incredibly supportive administration every
Mhm.
iteration that happened, but especially in the last 10 or so years, teachers are supported. We are backed up on whatever we have. And that makes a huge, huge difference.
Mhm. Yeah, and because one of the main things that you'll often hear about, like the classic "don't go into teaching" nowadays, is always the parents will be out to get you, and the administration will agree with the parents, and they'll never take your side. And that hasn't been my experience either. It's always been. Now I'm only kind of. You say you taught for 32 years. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I'm only finishing my second year full time. I slept for a couple
adorable.
years before that. I know. I know my hair's only starting to go gray on the side, so I'm sure that will eventually come out even more so in the next 5 to 10 years. But when you say support and iterated and kind of being like pretty much backed up, like
Mhm.
why why was that surprising to you? Like, people almost, like, sound shocked by that now.
They
Did you
are
ever, like,
shocked by
be like
that.
yeah, yeah.
And what I hear from so many teachers, especially on Instagram, where people can private message me and they can't do that on TikTok,
Mhm,
or they, are much more engaged with teachers on Instagram, whereas my TikTok
mhm,
audience is varied. They tell me horror stories about administrators who basically hang them out to dry. And a
mhm,
parent will come with an issue, and the administrator sides with the parent because we need to keep the parents placated. In my
mhm.
district, I have a superintendent who had a parent come in irate talking about calling her lawyer. And she goes, "Oh, honey, use my landline. I'll call my lawyer on my cell phone, but go ahead, use my landline."
Yeah,
You do that once or twice, word gets out. And
yeah,
anytime there was a meeting for a student issue, we had an administrator right there with us. So we never felt as if we were floating on our
mhm,
own and that they didn't have our back. I have an assistant superintendent right now who saw these directives from the state of New Jersey that were utter BS. And
mhm.
so he came to us and said, "Listen, I did them for everybody. That time that you were going to spend on them, do whatever you need to do in your classrooms. You now have an extra 4 hours." And we were, "What? You value our time? You're treating us like professionals? Wow."
Wow.
It's amazing. I work in a utopia. I really do. And I
Yeah.
recognize that.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it is different too, because obviously it sounds like from your first job, we call it the dog's breakfast. You kind of just get thrown into a school and you kind of take whatever the scraps are for courses, and they kind of just put you somewhere and hope you survive. But it's like you don't really know what to do. I think I've been very fortunate and kind of just I wanted to teach social studies and all social, and that's what they gave me. Now you get the marking, whatever. That's just kind of part of the job. But I've always felt like I can ask a question to my admin and not just be made to feel like an idiot. It's kind of always been nice to have that support, I've noticed, but
Especially as a younger teacher, when you're trying to
Mhm,
figure things out and you don't want to be judged for not
mhm,
knowing or not understanding a certain procedure. And I have had some administrators here and there who weren't long lived at our school who would always need to just show that they were the one in charge. However, that may manifest. It's yes,
mhm.
but here's what I'm going to do, or here. And those you just blink and nod and go, "Okay, fantastic. Got it.
Blink
Thank
and nod.
you."
And so now, like, you're finishing year 32, you're finishing your career, obviously not in a disgruntled way like you were saying, but what would make you encourage someone to go into teaching now? Or would you?
That is that's
The
a
easy
tough one.
question, right?
Yeah, right? That has so many layers and nuances. So when people message me on Instagram, I always say to them, when you're looking at school districts, you should really scour their website. You
Mhm,
should see how involved and engaged the teachers are. Look at their programs. Do they have a social media presence for the school that you could look at and examine? Do you
mhm.
happen to know anybody from the school who knows somebody from the school? Now, those opinions could be biased. Some people will
Yeah.
look on the township pages for whatever school that's in, and I say those are viper pits. You're not really going to get more than complaints in
Yes.
township Facebook pages, but
Mhm,
you really should do your due diligence to see what kind of school it is. Even look at the dismissal. Be a stalker.
mhm.
Drive by and see, do you see administrators, wandering around at dismissal and making sure that everything runs smoothly? Whatever you can do before you apply, I think that's a really good idea to do.
Oh, sorry, you froze up on me for a second there.
Okay.
No, it wasn't just staring into the abyss, don't worry. Um, and so, yeah, like, you're always kind of looking at but even just the profession in general, because one of the most common complaints even now and I've gotten mixed reviews as well, like, some people, even doing my practicums a few years ago yes, it was only a few years ago, was like, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" And it's always kind of like in a ha-ha way, but it's
Mhm.
also like, "I just spent 6 years trying to do this, like, don't why are you saying this to me now when I'm kind of,
Right.
like, right at the finish line?" Where you're kind of, like, making them feel that way, and again, not everyone's going to like, teaching is not for everyone, but I guess, what like, you had the supportive admin, but you still had the students, you still had the issues even at your school, so, like, what kept you in it and prevented you from actually looking elsewhere?
I I absolutely love teaching. I love being in
Mhm.
front of the class, and I love hearing student laughter. So
Mhm.
basically, my whole shtick this whole time has been stand up routine 6 times a day.
Mhm.
How can I need a velvet curtain and a handheld microphone and a little piano player off to the side, and I would have my whole
Mhm.
lounge act. But I know that for some of these kids, coming to school is their safe place. It
Mhm.
is the place where they get a meal and they get an adult who gives them attention and they have some connections with friends, or they have an activity that they can belong to that gives them some kind of feeling of inclusion. And so I've always wanted to create that, not only in my classroom, but with the Gay Straight Alliance that I've been the advisor of for 20 years. And
Mhm.
anytime I've been a class advisor or an advisor to another club, it's not just the teaching part that I love, it's making kids feel as if this is a place they want to be. And that has been such a motivator for me throughout the entire time. And when I see kids saying, I love coming to your class, or that was so funny, and they just want to connect with me, that's what keeps me going.
And I kind of like, and that's kind of like another answer too, because the relationships you build and the connections and like seeing them after they graduate. Are you in a high school? Sorry,
I am
or
in high
junior high
school.
still? Okay, yeah.
I'm in the
So
high school. Oh, yeah. I know I taught eighth grade one year. I
yes,
said, don't even give me freshmen. I will quit.
and I've only taught mostly grade 11 and 12 myself here in the first few years, and even just like seeing them after they graduate and they're kind of like mini adults while I'm kind of also like a mini adult, and like kind of going through the growing pains a little bit together has kind of been fun. And but even I've noticed that for some whatever reason there's a very large interest in the fact that you do not have children yourself. And so like I've never understood like questioning someone's motives for um not wanting children or like a family or whatever. But I guess because the question would be like, oh, if usually I guess the narrative is if a woman doesn't want children, it's oh they want to go be like the big headshot like lawyer or like the hedge fund manager or whatever. You're like, no, I just want to live my life. But I guess what kind of kept your interest in like working with kids, even though like not wanting any of your own?
Yeah, and that's something that I dealt with early in my career when I was young. And I
Hmm.
would have parents who would come in and literally say to my face, well, you don't understand because you don't have kids.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for devaluing me as much as possible and taking away my professionalism. That's really special. And I see where your kid
Yes.
gets it. So it was definitely something that happened when I was younger, but
Hmm.
that just took time for me to gain my reputation as a qualified
Hmm.
teacher and as
Hmm.
somebody who really enjoyed being around kids. And I said, it's not that I don't like kids. I love kids. I want people to keep
Hmm.
having kids because then teachers will have jobs. I just never had an urge whatsoever to have any of my own.
Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like even when I was looking through your profile, there was like an article written about how you don't want children. Like this is like the craziest thing to like ever warrant. Like again, like it is kind of interesting, I guess, because like you have like a very highly successful profile and like a solid social media presence. But I just always thought that was different or like strange. But
Well, now
even yeah,
it's more common because when
yes,
I started making
absolutely.
TikTok content about 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't many teachers on the app, first of all, and nobody was really talking about being child free, especially in their 50s. So I made one video to It's a Hard Knock Life, and that went viral. And that's what got a lot of people coming in to see me. And so I started making more child free by choice content. And because it was so novel at that point, I'm talking 4 or 5 years ago, I got interviews from a Russian TV station and a German TV station and South American, and people were just fascinated. And the opinions that came across, I have to say, 90% of the positive opinions are from women, and 90% of the negative opinions are from men. So now I'm so happy to see tons of child free creators on the
Hmm.
app and making wonderful content because so many people say, oh, you're young, wait until you're 50 or 60 or 70 and you're alone in a house full of cats. And I'm like, sir, First of all, why would that be bad? But second of
Yeah, I
all,
love cats.
that's the only alternative. You don't have kids and you're alone with cats. So there's no gray area for some people.
Sounds like a great existence to me.
It really
Um,
does.
yeah, and so I guess the other side of that is it's kind of based on your first year trying to walk through the hallway and not get shanked. It's Do you think the students now, again, speaking generally, are worse than they were when you started? Like the 30-year gap that you've been teaching in is like so consequential in terms of how fast things move kind of in society and like seeing them adjust through it. So like what are the 16-year-olds like from 1994 versus 2024? And like are they different
Oh,
and how?
well, human nature never changes. So
Mhm,
kids are kids no matter what. At their core,
mhm,
they want to be accepted. They want to feel heard. They don't want to be made fun of. They like to be a part of a group. No matter how much we have the stereotypes of kids being on their phones, they do want to be a part of something.
mhm,
I would say the behaviors of kids from 99 through 2004, 2005 were
mhm.
wild, where we had the most discipline issues. These were times where cell phones weren't around yet, and kids
Mhm,
were, driving around, um, selling drugs and getting drunk and having all these things going to parties. And we would get the periphery gossip in the school because there would be fights that would happen. We
of
haven't
course.
had a fight in our school in, I don't know, 3 years. In a school of 1,200 kids, and even before that, we'd have one a year. So the difference that I've seen is, yeah,
You
one a
guys buy
year.
tickets and stuff or
Yeah.
like
It's like a cage match where we took everybody out of the gym and we're like, let's get ready to rumble. No, it would just be a pop up here and there.
It's a
But
pre-Christmas break
yeah,
tradition here.
we could probably sell tickets to that.
Yeah.
But now we find that kids are, and even with the cell phones, I started to see a change in kids around 2015, 2016.
Mhm,
They were less engaged with teachers. They were less engaged with each other as far as conversations go. And I
mhm,
knew at that point we were in trouble, and it got really bad right before the pandemic. And then when kids came back after the pandemic, it was especially bad because they were a little behind on social skills. I do have to
mhm.
say, this year was the first quote unquote normal year that I felt pre COVID. It really felt like 2016 to me because some kids are absolutely sick of their phones.
I totally agree with that because even for myself, because I'm not trying to underage myself here too much, but 2015 was the year I graduated high school,
Okay,
and I noticed that even then, like I remember because I always say to my students, I'm like, I'm probably one of the only teachers you guys have who had Instagram and Snapchat and like I guess not Twitter now, but I had these apps when I was in high school too, and like I'm seeing it now. The
right.
craziest change I've seen is like Snapchat was just kind of like another messaging thing, but now it's like they're just like double tapping and just sending blank things, and it's like thousands a day, and you see like 50 on their phone. Like even just walking around the room, you'll see them scroll on their phone. They have like 90 unopened Snapchats. I'm like, I don't even understand what this is doing, but I
It's
think people are
compulsive.
yeah. And like I've heard from some people, they're like, you know what, the kids are the same, they're just different. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of just
Yes.
doing, they just have different things. Like they're not smoking cigarettes across the street anymore. They're just vaping in the bathroom. Like it's kind of the same like behavior overall. But one of the main things I've been most, I guess, concerned about is they're just like detached from everything. And it's always like they're trying to escape all the time, like through an app or through something. I even have students I notice like teaching social, like whenever I start getting into anything like controversial or anything like kind of on those lines, they pull their phone out and start scrolling. Like it's like a compulsion to like escape the moment. Have you
Right.
kind of found
Escape
that
the
for yourself?
uncomfortable. Yeah. Escape
Yeah.
the uncomfortable. I have seen, as much as they might not vocalize what they know about the world around them, this is a very socially conscious generation.
Hmm.
They are well aware of conflicts going on around the world, especially because of
Hmm.
TikTok. They are well aware of some of the issues affecting women, especially
Mhm.
in today's world. So way more than I was growing up in the 80s. I didn't even know who the vice president was when I was growing up. And I was too worried about making my
Yeah.
hair gigantic and wearing neon. So there was not too much that I could talk about politically, worldwide, socially. And these
Mhm.
kids can do that. They might not be having long conversations with us about it, but
Mhm.
when I talk about certain things, I'll see kids say, oh, because blah, blah, blah. And they'll trace the whole origin of it. And I'll go, okay, I didn't know that was in there. All right, good, good. I was going to tell you something, but it looks like I don't need to. So, as
Mhm.
much as they've turned inward in a lot of ways, I feel as if they're ingesting more than they
Mhm.
did before, and not just the pictures. I think they're kind of getting over influencers. They're kind of over
Yep.
celebrity. They are more in tune with a lot of kids are in tune with self-improvement. And I have kids who are
Mhm.
entrepreneurs in my school, and they're
Mhm.
trying to create their own business because they're basically saying, well, your generation and the generation before messed it up for us, so we have to make our own jobs. And I'm like, you are
Mhm.
100% right.
Look, it's even funny too because I've talked to a few like other like teacher. I don't know. I'm not trying to like say that you're an influencer, but like people who have a higher social media presence, and like some of them will say like they'll be subbing or something, and they might have 500,000 followers on Instagram, and then the students are like, "Cool, like weird flex." So like they're so not interested, like they don't actually care at all. So it
Nope.
is kind of like a positive, but yeah, like I don't know. I guess all I'm trying to maybe even ask or say is that even myself graduating in 2015 to now, like this year felt familiar to me. Like all
Yes.
the other years felt like recovery, and we're all going, and like even for ourselves, it was kind of weird. Like I think I canceled our previous time because we had a wildfire here
Right.
in Fort McMurray, and like we had a wildfire here in 2016 where it was like, but again, it was weird seeing all the kids because I was upgrading courses at the time, and then like all my students were in grade 3, and then they were all in grade 12. So it was weird kind of seeing them in
Oh,
my position.
wow.
It was a very full circle moment. It was very strange. Um, but the kids don't seem like zombies, and they don't seem like they're going to amount to nothing. I kind of get sick of that narrative, and I know it's kind of like it might sound preachy to be like, oh, like no, like they're okay, like they're not perfect, but no one ever has been. So I find that like it all kind of comes down to people are kind of discouraging people from going into teaching and like going into education because the kids suck. And I just don't see that
I
myself.
don't either. I don't either. And I
Yeah.
understand in some of the schools where teachers reach out to me and they are in schools where they don't get adequate funding and they don't have resources, they don't have teams or
Mhm.
activities, and that doesn't have a buy-in for kids. So they come in not really feeling a sense of community or a sense of belonging. And so the school is just a way to tick the time so that they don't go to jail and their
Yeah.
parents don't get a fine.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other kids who aren't in situations like that, there is definitely a turn that I have seen. And I think the way that you said it, this year seems familiar. It
Mhm.
really does. It harkens back to pre pandemic times. And I'm so happy to, I've been able to make a whole series of teaching seniors on TikTok because they come in
Mhm.
my room for lunch and we're talking about issues face to
Yeah.
face and their phones aren't in their hand, just sandwiches.
Mhm.
So it's really, a nice thing to see. And I'm happy that's coming back. But I did a speech to the senior class last year, and I said, every single generation has complained about the generation
Oh,
before.
yeah. Yeah.
And they've said, well, this generation coming up is doing X, Y, and Z. And I can't believe these kids today.
Mhm.
Kids are kids are kids. Human nature never changes. The situations around them change. But to say that these kids categorically are unmotivated or lazy, I
Mhm.
think is doing them a disservice
Yeah.
because you don't want to make it as if they can't go out and do certain things and there's roadblocks for them. And I would love to see more people get into teaching. I think, especially with what we have going on in America right now, with a lot of states trying to do vouchers, which takes
Mhm.
money from public education.
Mhm,
and puts it in private, unregulated schools. We
mhm.
need our education system strengthened so much. And who better than young, enthusiastic teachers who can also combat AI? Because I'm exhausted.
I
That's
know
one of the reasons I said I got to go because I
I
don't have it
know.
in me.
Like, we even do, like, a full separate secure account thing for any essay writing. Like, I can't assign any sort of in social, like, teaching essay questions or argumentation, like, the kids will do and now even this past week, we had, like, notices from our admin, like, "Oh, kids are starting to crack the code of these secure account things where they can log out and do this." I'm like, "This is just." I think it has to just go back to pen and paper. I hate that, like, I'm that's the way you combat AI is don't give them technology at all. I don't know. I'm obviously still trying to figure that out as well because I would say that's like the almost the frustrating part with the newer kids or the new like generation of kids. It's just so much easier for them to cheat on everything.
Sure,
And
it
it's so
is.
easy to get away with things and like some of them are just not scared. Like they're just like, I will do whatever I can, dude. Like I heard a kid the other day in our school who has like 36,000 entries on ChatGPT. And I'm like,
Oh my
that is so
goodness.
much dedication to just like, how do I get around this? And I even thought like you could literally just master everything you're doing, but just by not doing that. And that's the part where I
Right.
think like they're just finding the loopholes so much easier. But again, some intelligence required to actually go and find the loopholes and execute it properly as well. So yeah.
Well, they're critically thinking on some
Yeah.
level. Um, so, you got to hand it to them that way. But
Yeah.
this year, I had all of my assignments either handwritten or when they
Mhm.
had an extended project that I used to do over the course of 2 weeks where they could take it home. And
Mhm.
this year, I did it in a Google Doc, and I would release the document at the beginning of class. I would have
Mhm.
GoGuardian up on my computer to make sure that
Ah,
was
we've
the
talked
only
about
tab
that.
open.
Yeah.
And then I would go in and help them because I could go on GoGuardian, go right into their document and
Mhm.
give them helpful hints. But I could also see that they had no other tabs open. I
Yeah,
could
the
see
snake
that
game going.
exactly, exactly. And I could see that, their phones had to be on their desk face down. And at the end of the
Mhm.
period, they had to turn the Google Doc in and they could look at it at night, but they couldn't edit the document. And so the next day they
Oh.
would come in and they would have to have everything ready to go. And I have to tell you, I've never had such good papers in my whole career
Mhm.
because it was a dedicated 5 days in class writing and editing. Whereas we all know, as high school teachers especially, you give a kid 2 weeks to do something, they do it in the last half hour.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm
Yeah.
thinking they're going to start it on one day and revise it on another day and then get somebody else to help them edit. Nope. They're doing it a half an hour before it's due, saying, well, I don't care if I get a C because my average will still be a B. Or even if I get an
Mhm.
F, I'll still have
Yeah.
a C. I'm like, oh, your calculations are just
I know.
wonderful.
I love, like, the end of semester because we have, like, the, like, diploma state exams for our grade 12s, and they're worth 30% of, like, their final grade here now. It used to be 50. Um, but they'll do, like, the calculation in their mind of, like, what can I get? Like, I can get a 43.7 and still pass. I'm like, "No, like, that's not what we're trying to do." But I guess kinda going back to, like, that pre-post COVID thing, I've kind of even been wondering because I still see the lagging effects of it now of pretty much kids who like, what were the social skills they were lacking, and, like, how did you kind of help them with them?
When they came back from COVID, I noticed that I wasn't getting verbal responses from kids in class. So
Mhm.
I would ask a question, and some kids would impulsively do a thumbs up, which is what we had them doing on all of our Google Meets during the pandemic. And I had to just
That's
say, oh,
crazy.
that's adorable. But listen, I'm going to need you to vocalize for this.
Mhm.
So you will say yes or no, and some of them I had to teach them eye contact. So
Mm.
when you're having a conversation with somebody, you want to have eye contact. You actually want to listen and not give an example from your own life. You want to ask a follow up question. And I know you're just trying to give that example so you're connecting with them, but ask a follow up question. When you do a handshake, don't give a dead fish. Make sure you are actually gripping the hand. So I really went through some of those basics.
Mhm.
And even now in classes where they're not with their friends, sometimes I'll ask a question and kids will look at me and they'll do a little nod. And I was like, this is what an expression looks like: happy, sad. I'll do that and then they'll laugh.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they're laughing, it's just, huh. And I'll go, guys, wait, I'm hilarious. And you should be. And they're like, no, you're really funny. I'm like, well,
And
then make your
I
body
think they
language match it.
genuinely, yeah, I think they genuinely believe that too. They're like, "Oh yeah, like Miss Hawk's hilarious," but they're like, like they don't
Yeah,
actually. That's like their new way of expressing. I'm like, no, you're supposed to go like, ha ha ha, like do it with me.
exactly. And I do that. And then they think that's funny. So I'm saying it's okay to emote. And what
Yeah.
some kids have told me is they don't want to be seen as the punk who is kissing up to the teacher by laughing. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh God, all right, well, maybe one day you'll get over that, because that's really
Yeah.
not something that you should cling on to, because
Yeah.
unless you're going to actually follow Stoic philosophy, you should have some expression in your life. And if you want to do that, wonderful. I will understand you completely and I will take that blank affect. But until then, I need an expression.
It's like, but at least their papers will be killer if they're following Stoic philosophy. So at least there's a trade off there with those secure accounts. But yeah,
True.
yeah, and like the social skills again, even because I thought it was funny. My second practicum. I was teaching junior high my practicum, and like they're never not going to be chatty. I think we're going to go the next 500 years. I don't care if we've got a camera in every room and computers in our brains. They're still not going to shut off.
Agree.
I think that's always going to be the case, and it can be fun. Like sometimes I'll go from like my high school all day, where it's kind of more like chum and glum. Some days where you're kind of just doing the lecturing and the discussion, and everyone's like kind of like half tired. Then you internally cover a junior high class, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I just walked into. Um, but I remember my second practicum. I asked one of the grade 12 teachers if I could teach in one of their classes, and I was like, "Can I teach for a day?" In my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is like a state exam course, so like they probably won't want me to teach at all. And she's like, "Do you want to do a full week?" I said, "Okay, sure." So it's like the
Wow.
university stream social, and like they were super chill, but there was like 25 kids in the class, and this was also, I believe, this would have been 2022. So kind of like right as we're kind of getting back into
Okay.
classes full time again, still kind of like I can't even remember the names of the variants of COVID, but we were kind of going in and out of those at the time.
Right.
But it was in May, or sorry, April. And the class was just like, it wasn't a dead fish handshake. It was like deer in headlights. Just I was, and but I would even budget time in my lesson plan for discussion, and then they just
Hmm.
weren't having it at all. And I was just like, I do not know how to sit up here and answer my own questions all the time, because that's just not what I'm used to in social at all. But it was the most alarming situation where even my like veteran teacher who was like mentoring me, she said, "Yeah, I've never seen a class like this." And I don't know if that was just a COVID thing or not,
It
but
was. We saw the same
yeah.
thing where we were as well, where lessons I had done and revised and really honed over the years fell flat in
Mhm.
2021, 2022, and part of 2023, the end of 2023. Coming back this year, I had kids who were ready to discuss. They were ready to work in groups. They were eager to talk about certain things. And that's why
Mm.
this year was a great year to end on, because I did get a glimpse
Like a
of
high
that
note almost.
pre-pandemic
Mhm.
teaching. Yeah, I was okay, this is good. This is nice to know that it's
Yeah.
going in this direction, and I hope it continues to go in that direction for future teachers.
Well, yeah, so, like, are you optimistic for kinda like the next, like, from what you've seen of your teachers with, like, 5 years or less experience that you've kinda had maybe come into your school, I'm not sure how difficult it is to secure a contract in your area, but are you optimistic for kinda how things are going? Or are you kinda more on the pessimistic wing? The
It's
grin kinda tells me both.
50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
50-50, because we've had some teachers who have come in and they've just said, you know what? Teaching isn't for me. It's
Mhm.
not this school, it's not the kids, it's the workload. And
Mhm.
that's what most of them will leave for. Most of our teachers who do leave within the first couple years have a full freshman schedule. So
Yeah.
they're the ones who just cannot. And I get that. That's
Yeah.
like herding cats, for an entire 7
Yep.
hours. But most people who are leaving because they don't realize how daunting it is to plan when you have 2, 3, sometimes 4 preps for your 6 periods. And when you give an assignment, you have 2, 3, 4 class sets to grade, and your weekends can be taken up. And unfortunately, many of our younger teachers have second jobs. So they're trying to balance all of the things that I did in the beginning of my career without a part-time job. They're trying to do all of that with a part-time job, bartending on the weekends, waitressing during the week, coaching at soccer clinics. So it's just untenable for a lot of younger teachers who need the income from
Hmm.
that second job to dedicate the time and effort necessary to hand things back in a timely fashion. And I tell them, listen, you have to create your boundaries. And if you are
Hmm.
working a second job, maybe they're not going to get feedback for 3 or 4 days. And that's something that they have to get used to as long as you're progressing in your lessons. But there does need to be some downtime, or these kids will burn out very, very
Hmm.
quickly.
And so I always find boundaries to be, because boundaries is something my wife keeps telling me I need to do with the school, but then I keep not doing. Like this year, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do less at work. Like I'm gonna do like a few
How'd that
less
go for
sports, and
you?
then I was like, why not start a podcast? Like, it was a very not what I expected, I guess. But what kind of like what would you define as a boundary that you put in place, stuck to, and actually helped you make it more feasible when going through it?
I had to set some boundaries pretty early on because
Mm.
for some reason, went back to grad school 3 times. And each time, I know. So I just kept learning. So when I was doing my doctorate, I said, I have to stop this work at a certain time during the day and then
Mhm.
stop my schoolwork at a certain time during the day. Because if I don't have time to sit and drool in front of the TV, my brain will actually leak out of my ear at some
Yeah.
point. So that all the grad school work really helped me to say, what are my priorities here? And what's the most important thing for me to do? Maybe I don't chaperone every single event at school this year. Maybe I don't say yes to the kid who came up to me begging for an advisor for a new club and I don't want it to fail. So
Mhm.
saying no, people like us saying no, it's really difficult. And I
Like,
had to
how
learn
dare
how to
you?
do that. How dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then after the pandemic, I really stopped bringing a lot of work home. I also
Mhm.
stopped giving homework because I said, if I feel this way after school, what are my kids feeling when they have 6 other classes, 7 other classes? I don't want to come home and do hours of work. And can I utilize my class time effectively enough to do fewer things, but with way more depth? So I
Mhm.
cut my curriculum. I'm not doing 10 books, I'm doing
Yep.
4 with
Yep.
incredible depth. I'm not reading, 20 poems. We're doing 10 with depth. And I
Mhm.
found that I get better responses from the students. My workload is better, their workload is better. And since they know they don't have homework, they use their class time well. And I teach AP Lit, and my kids,
Yeah.
my passing rate is over 90%. And people are saying, oh, you have to give them a good range of 10 to 20 books. I give my kids 10 to 20 books. And I'm like, that's adorable. You give them 10 to 20 books, but I guarantee they maybe read 1 or 2. The rest are spark noted.
Yeah.
So I said,
Yeah.
what are my priorities? And that's how I set my boundaries.
Yeah, because I totally agree with that. Like trying to, because we're almost like guilting ourselves into forcing everyone to spread themselves too thin, and it's just not like, why are we all doing this to each other? Like, why don't we just like rein it in a little bit. We'll focus on a few things in depth and actually learn something, not pretend to learn for a whole thing and like try and pass tests and kind of get through that. That's kind of something that I found as well. I'm still on the I want to chaperone everything train, but I'm starting to move away from that. And this kind of just sparked another question for me. No, no pun intended on your Spark Notes thing. Um, it's been weird for me because like I know some other people kind of in my age group. It's almost like a bit of a intellectual midlife crisis almost because like you go through university, you go through like your education degree, whatever that is, teachers college, then you teach for a year, and now like I'm at the end of year 2, but like this year I taught the same courses I did last year. So like I had a bit more familiarity with the curriculum and that stuff, but now I'm almost like in a weird fear of missing out almost of not learning anymore, which was weird. Like obviously you're still learning how to like change things up and like add some variety, but you're not taking courses anymore. Like you're not actually
Mhm.
going through and doing your own writing and stuff. So I guess going back now, if you're kind of in that early stage teacher, like what would you like recommend they do in their search for grad school? Not necessarily like what to study.
I think a lot of the grad school programs are way more in tune with what teaching is like than when I got my first master's degree in 2000. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got my second one in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did national board certification in 2004. And then I did my
Wow.
doctorate 2006 to 2011.
I was
And
expecting you to say like 2016 or something. It was like 2002. It's like,
oh no, I just kept going right at it. But you know what? I listened to what you just said, and I felt smarter and
mm,
sharper because I was constantly learning myself
mm-hmm,
and I was doing assignments. And it changed the way that I gave assignments to my students because
mm-hmm,
I think so many teachers are so far away from their own learning that they forget what it's like to be a learner. And
mm-hmm,
because I was going through so many years of school, I was saying, well, why am I doing this to them? Is it really necessary when they have jobs, when they have sports and activities and things that can help them to get into college? So, being
mm-hmm,
a student myself not only made me feel smarter and better and more prepared, but it actually helped me to understand my students better. And honestly, after I was done grad school, I feel as if I've been on a slope downward ever since. I try to read nonfiction books and maybe take a
mm-hmm,
class on something because it really is good to always learn.
mm-hmm. And that's kind of been I'm honestly just like excited that you just said that because obviously as a veteran teacher, I always like tell people they're like, no, like wait at least 7 or 8 years of teaching before you like go in. And I'm just like, it's not that I think I'm gonna be able to run the district tomorrow. It's like I think like I just want to start doing more things that's just kind of like keeping myself in it. Cause I feel like I wouldn't want to start like sloping, I guess, to, and I am talking about not just talking about myself here, just people kind of in that early stage of education of just where do you go when and you're like listening to all these different opinions of like you should do that or this. It's kind of like, do I have my own children or not? Kind of in your head about your education, but everyone
Right?
has their opinion, and I'm kind of like, just do what you want if you're interested.
That's
But so I only
exactly
got a
it.
couple. Yeah, so I only got a couple more things to ask you here before we wrap up. I got a couple um, quotes that I kind of usually wrap up with my guests, and the first one is obviously like there's the university part of education and developing as a teacher and you're doing your PD and all that fun stuff. But there was a quote that said, "Don't let school get in the way of your education." So, what are some of the things about like teaching that you think like no matter how many courses you took, like you did 3 master's programs, like what are some of the unteachable things that you felt that are necessary to be a better educator?
I think listening to the students and not following a lesson plan exactly as you thought it
Mm-hmm.
was going to go. There have been so many times throughout my career where I have pivoted because a topic comes up that I wasn't expecting, or there is a question that comes up that I don't know the answer to. And I love
Mm-hmm.
those moments where I know there's some people who like to do this particular lesson on the 12th day of school for this long. And that's fine. They have to have
Yeah.
their, but I am willy nilly. My lesson plans, I can never write them the way that they should be written because
Mhm.
I'm usually off the rails very quickly because of a conversation we have in class or because of a question that a student brings up.
Hmm.
And I can make them detectives and say, hey, listen, let's go. Let's find some stuff out about this. Okay, what did you find? What's your source? Is that a good
Hmm.
source? Can somebody vet that? So then it just takes a whole different direction. And it's not
Yep.
school per se, it's
Hmm.
on the spot improvised learning.
Yeah, honestly, a few projects that we've done in class have usually been one of the ones where it's just been on the cuff and we like design the project together and we actually like take a week and try and do it.
It's great.
And so I think, oh yeah, that's honestly what makes it enjoyable. Not even like fun necessarily. It is fun, but it actually makes it like worthwhile. Like everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, like everyone's kind of piecing into it as well.
They have
Um,
ownership of it.
yeah, and and I kind of like that quote because even like teacher university education and all that stuff, we all even like everyone I went through it with, we were kind of like, nothing that actually prepares you for when you're standing in front of 24 blank stares and you're like dying inside, and it's like okay. So the last one is education is what remains once you forget everything that you learned in school. So kind of on a similar um like trail as the last one, but I guess
Mhm.
what is it that you wanted students to take away from their time with you as their teacher, especially now that you're going into retirement? Like, what is it that you hope the students took away from their time with you that they won't get with anyone else?
I always encourage my students to question and
Hmm.
to be critical thinkers and make inferences, be analytical. I said, the poetry that I teach you will never matter in your life. If anybody ever comes up to you, unless you're on
Hmm.
Jeopardy, and says, tell
Yes.
me about, Song of the Sky Loom by the Nadawasi Indian tribe, please call me so I can fall out of my
Yes.
chair and die, because it's not about the poetry. It's not about the
Mhm.
story. It's not about the book. It's about the skills you develop while reading it and the empathy you grow while learning about different people who don't look like you, act like you, worship like you, live like you. So I always wanted them to take those transferable skills with them while creating a sense of empathy for just human beings around the world.
Beautiful. And so I couldn't say that better myself. And like usually I've had the same argument with people about like they're like, Mr. Clark, do you like English? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of it can get a little cheesy sometimes, but I always kind of come back to that point. They're like, oh, I don't know why we do it. But I'm like, it's not about the actual poem. It's about like the process of going through it and discussing and actually like digging into the layers. I think one is fun, or I still find it fun. Actually, my minor in English like education course is one of the favorite courses I ever took. Like doing it with
Nice.
other people who are at that level. But so I guess the last thing I have to ask is, you've got 1 week left. Other than probably a few margaritas, I mean, what's in the future for you kind of going forward?
That's a great question.
It's probably the one you didn't want me to ask at all.
I know, it's fine. So yeah, I'm like, well, sleep. First of all, I'm
Yes.
very
Yeah.
excited to go to the bathroom when I actually need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's very good. I live on a college campus like an idiot.
Mm.
They have luxury adult housing on this college campus. And I was like, oh,
Oh.
that would be fun until I moved
Uh-huh.
here and get a
Yep.
contact high and hear exhaust on the cars all the time. But I would love to be an academic advisor here.
Mhm.
And with the New Jersey pension system, I can't even apply until after a breakage of service, which is October 1st. So I'm thinking in
Oh.
January, I'll start my job search. So from June 14th through January, I am going to take lots of little vacations, spend a lot of time with my
Nice.
mother, my boyfriend, my family. I'm picking up pickleball because, of course, I am.
Of
Um,
course. Of
yeah,
course you are.
what woman in their 50s who's retired isn't doing pickleball?
Or just
So,
watch the Achilles tendon. I hear
yeah,
bad things
exactly,
about that. Yeah, that's
exactly.
all you gotta just make sure you stretch.
Yeah, I want to volunteer to be a cat cuddler at PetSmart, because you get to do that for an hour a day and socialize the cats. So all of the things that I've wanted to do for a while, I'm just going to be a jack of all trades.
Okay, well, I'm gonna cancel my podcast and be a cat cuddler now. That's how I will spend my Sunday and Saturday mornings now instead. I did not know that was a thing.
It's a
Um,
thing.
well, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on today, and honestly, good luck with that retirement.
Thank you so much.